Okay, so get ready to dive into the Renaissance,
Oh,
but not the way you learned it in school.
okay.
We're going to uncover how marketing
Yes, marketing.
influenced one of the greatest artists of all time, Leonardo da Vinci. So you're probably curious about how art and commerce kind of mixed back then, especially with Leonardo and that powerful Medici family.
Right. Well, get ready for some surprising links between like beautiful paintings and high-end fabrics.
Yeah, it's fascinating. We often see the Renaissance as just this pure explosion of like art and creativity and genius. But the reality is
Uh-huh.
it was totally intertwined with like power,
Mm.
money.
And even like early forms of branding.
I like that. Early forms of branding. Okay, so let's unpack this Medici family a bit. Now, they were obviously super famous for their art patronage, but I'm guessing there's more to the story than that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The Medicis were brilliant business people, like first and foremost. Their banking and commerce empire that fueled their ability to really shape the cultural scene in Florence. They weren't just like buying pretty pictures, They were investing in the system that elevated their status
Yeah.
and also subtly promoted their businesses.
So they were kind of like today's tech giants, right? Funding these huge art installations. So there's like a strategy at play here.
Yeah.
But how did all this impact a young Leonardo da Vinci? I mean, he was just starting out when he arrived in Florence.
Right. Imagine, stepping into Florence back then. It was buzzing with artistic energy, thanks to Lorenzo de' Medici's patronage. It was like a Renaissance Silicon Valley,
Yeah.
attracting all the top talent and fostering collaboration. And Leonardo kind of landed right in the heart of this. And while he was undoubtedly like a genius, this environment, significantly impacted his growth.
So even back then, strategic investments were creating these hubs of talent. Makes you wonder if genius thrives in clusters.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Leonardo's art for a second. Did the Medici influence actually like show up in his early work?
Oh, absolutely. Let's take the Baptism of Christ, for example. It's a painting that Leonardo actually collaborated on with his teacher Verrocchio. And it showcases like this incredible realism and the use of what's called chiaroscuro, which is basically a technique that uses light and shadow to create like depth and drama. And these elements were very much in line with the Medici taste and the trends they were setting.
So it's like they were dictating fashion, but with paintbrushes instead of fabrics. So Leonardo was essentially like catering to the Medici preferences.
Yeah, in a way, yes. Artists needed patrons. And aligning with the Medici aesthetic was a surefire way to get noticed and gain their support. I mean, it was a way to rise in the ranks. And let's be honest, it was probably a pretty smart career move for a young artist like Leonardo.
I love this. Now things are getting interesting. So it wasn't just about creating beautiful art. It was about understanding the market, playing the game and aligning your art with like the tastes of the powerful.
Precisely. And to understand the full scope of this, we need to kind of delve into Medici's fascination with humanism. They were really captivated by classical philosophy and this idea of celebrating the human form and individual potential.
Hold on. So now we're adding philosophy to the mix. These Medicis were a busy bunch.
Oh, they were definitely like Renaissance multitaskers. And this humanist philosophy, it seeped into their art patronage as well. Just look at some of Leonardo's other works, like The Annunciation or The Virgin of the Rocks. He infused these traditional religious themes with this like really relatable human emotion, which was a hallmark of humanist thought.
So even religious art became a way to like connect with people on a deeper emotional level, almost like an early form of emotional marketing.
You're spot on. The Medici understood the power of forging these connections. They used art to resonate with people, to subtly promote their values, and ultimately to strengthen their grip on Florence.
Okay, so we've got the Medici, these savvy business folks who also happen to be major art influencers, and we've got Leonardo soaking up all this artistic energy and humanist thinking. But where does the marketing part truly come in?
Well, this is where things get really interesting. Remember, Florence was a textile hub. The Medici made a fortune in fabrics, and they found a brilliant way to use art to subtly showcase their products.
Wait a minute, are you telling me there are hidden ads in Leonardo's paintings? Like some Renaissance version of product placement?
You got it. Let's take the Virgin of the Rocks as an example. Those incredibly detailed fabrics that the figures are wearing, they're not just artistic flourishes, they're showcasing the luxurious textiles produced by the Medici workshops.
Whoa, it's like a high fashion runway disguised as a religious painting. Talk about sneaky marketing.
It was incredibly clever. They weren't just commissioning a beautiful artwork. They were associating their brand with beauty, quality, and even divine grace. It's a marketing tactic that transcends centuries, don't you think?
My mind is blown. They were weaving their commercial interests right into the fabric, pun intended, of Florentine art and culture. But hold on. Didn't Leonardo also paint The Last Supper? That wasn't commissioned by the Medici, was it?
You're absolutely right. The Last Supper was commissioned by Duke Ludovico Sforza of Milan. However, the Medici's influence on art was so pervasive
Yeah.
that it kind of extended beyond their direct patronage.
So even when they weren't directly calling the shots, their artistic language was still shaping the art world. That's incredible.
Precisely. And you can see that in The Last Supper. The focus on narrative clarity, the raw emotion in the scene, the way Leonardo draws your eye to the central figure. All of these elements reflect the artistic principles. They were championed by the Medici. They were the tastemakers, setting the trends for artists to follow.
It's amazing how they created this whole artistic movement that extended far beyond their own city. I'm starting to see Renaissance art in a whole new light. But tell me, how did this Medici influence impact art history in the long run? Did it end with them, or did it have like a lasting effect? So we've uncovered this like fascinating link between the Medici's, commercial ambitions and their art patronage. So it's like they were marketing geniuses centuries ahead of their time. But let's dig a little deeper. What were some like specific techniques that Leonardo used in his paintings that actually served the Medici's like business interests?
Well, Leonardo was a master of detail and realism, particularly when it came to depicting fabrics. He could capture the texture and sheen of different materials with such accuracy that viewers could practically, feel the luxurious velvet or shimmering silk just by looking at the painting.
I can almost picture like those rich fabrics now, draped across the figures in his paintings. But it wasn't just about showing off his artistic skills, was it?
No, exactly. Remember in Renaissance Florence, clothing was a powerful symbol of status, wealth, and taste. And by showcasing these luxurious fabrics in his paintings, Leonardo was essentially creating aspirational imagery for the Florentine elite. It's as if he was saying, look how elegant and sophisticated you could be if you dressed in Medici-made textiles.
Oh, wow. It's like he was creating the Renaissance equivalent of like a high-fashion magazine spread, but with religious figures and wealthy patrons as his models.
Precisely. And let's not forget the power of association. By placing these fabrics in scenes depicting, religious figures or influential individuals, Leonardo was subtly linking the Medici brand with beauty, piety, and power. It's a classic marketing technique, aligning your brand with positive attributes to elevate its perceived value.
It's fascinating how they managed to weave these commercial interests
Into
the very fabric, pun intended, of Florentine art and culture. But was Leonardo aware that he was being used as a marketing tool? Even if subtle?
Well, that's a question that art historians still debate today. It's possible that Leonardo, being so absorbed in his, artistic pursuits and scientific explorations, wasn't fully conscious of the commercial implications of his work. He may have simply been focused on achieving artistic perfection and fulfilling the wishes of his patrons.
Or maybe he understood the game and played along willingly. After all, artists need patrons to survive, right? And the Medici were the most powerful patrons in Florence. So aligning with their interests even in subtle ways would have been a pretty shrewd move for any artist seeking success and recognition.
That's certainly a possibility. It's a fascinating dilemma, isn't it? On the one hand, we have this artistic genius pushing the boundaries of art and science, but on the other hand, he's operating within a system where art is inherently intertwined with commerce and power dynamics.
It really highlights the complexities of the Renaissance, this era that we often romanticize for its artistic brilliance. But it was also a time of intense competition, social climbing, and as we've discovered some very clever marketing strategies, it makes you wonder, are there any modern parallels to what the Medici were doing with art and marketing?
That's a great question, and one that's worth pondering. Think about the ways in which brands today utilize art and artists to promote their products and values. Do you see any echoes of the Medici strategies in the modern world?
That's a thought-provoking question. It's certainly something to consider as we kind of move on and to discuss how the Medici's influence extended beyond their direct involvement. We were talking about mannerism earlier and how it emerged as a reaction to the Renaissance. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Of course. Mannerism, which followed the High Renaissance, can be seen as a response to, or even a rebellion against, the artistic ideals that the Medici had cultivated.
So it's like a pendulum swing, a shift away from the established norms.
Precisely. Recall the key elements of the Medici aesthetic: realism, balance, harmony, and those meticulously rendered details, especially in fabrics, mannerism in a sense. Flip the script on all of that.
How so? Did they just abandon realism altogether?
In a way, yes. Mannerist artists rejected the strict rules of perspective and proportion. that had defined Renaissance art. They elongated figures, twisted poses into unnatural contortions, embraced jarring color combinations, and often infused their work with a sense of artificiality and theatricality.
It sounds almost like they were intentionally trying to be unsettling, to break
Yeah.
away from the polished perfection of the Renaissance.
Mhm.
But what was the motivation behind this shift?
Well, there are various interpretations, but one perspective is that mannerism reflected the anxieties and uncertainties of the time. While the Renaissance brought about, incredible advancements in art, science, and culture, it was also a period of significant upheaval. The old certainties were crumbling, and new ideas about religion, politics, and the very nature of humanity were emerging, often leading to conflict and instability.
So mannerism was like a visual representation of this cultural and intellectual turmoil.
Exactly. Instead of striving for the idealized realism and harmonious compositions, favored by the Medici and the high Renaissance artists, Mannerist artists embraced ambiguity, complexity, and a sense of unease. Their distorted figures and unsettling compositions mirrored the psychological and spiritual anxieties of their era.
It's almost as if they were holding up like a distorted mirror to the Renaissance, reflecting back a more fragmented and disharmonious view of the world. But how did the Medici react to this artistic shift? Did they, embrace it? Or did they see it as a threat to their carefully cultivated aesthetic and influence?
That's an interesting question, and it speaks to the complexities of the Medici family and their relationship with art. While they were initially champions of the high Renaissance style, later generations of the Medici actually became patrons of Mannerist artists.
Really? So even the Medici, with their keen eye for marketing and control, couldn't intentionally resist the allure of this, rebellious and unsettling new style?
It seems that even they recognized the power and expressiveness of Mannerism, perhaps sensing that it captured a certain truth about the changing times. It's a reminder that art has a way of evolving, defying expectations, and reflecting the complexities of the human experience in ways that even the most influential patrons can't entirely control.
This is so fascinating. I'm starting to see how the Medici's influence, while profound, wasn't the end of the story. It actually set the stage for a whole new chapter in art history, one that challenged conventions and embraced a more complex, even unsettling view of the world.
And that's the beauty of exploring art history. It's not just about appreciating aesthetics. It's about understanding how art reflects the social, political, and even economic forces that shape our world.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener. It's amazing how what started as a simple question about the Medici and Leonardo has led us to this exploration of marketing, power dynamics, and the evolution of artistic styles.
It's been my pleasure to explore these ideas with you. And before we conclude, I want to leave our listener with a final thought-provoking question.
Whew. I love a good cliffhanger. What is it?
We've been discussing how the Medici used art as a tool for marketing and influence. Now, I want you to consider the art being produced today. Do you see any similar connections between art and marketing in the modern world? Are there artists whose work is subtly promoting a brand, a message, or even a political ideology?
That's a fantastic question.
Mhm.
It makes you wonder if we're all being subtly influenced by marketing messages hidden within the art we consume, just like those Florentines, admiring Leonardo's paintings.
It's certainly something to think about, isn't it? And perhaps it will inspire you to look at art with a more critical and discerning eye, considering the motivations and messages that might be embedded beneath the surface.
Yeah, that's a question that makes you pause and think. Are we as susceptible to these subtle marketing messages in art as the people who viewed these masterpieces centuries ago? It's fascinating and a little unsettling at the same time.
Yeah, it really underscores the fact that art is never truly neutral. It's always a product of its context, reflecting the power dynamics, the social values, and yes, even the commercial agendas of its time.
So as viewers of art, should we be suspicious of every painting or sculpture we encounter? Should we be on the lookout for hidden agendas lurking behind every brushstroke?
I wouldn't say suspicious, but certainly more aware. The goal isn't to become cynical about art, but to engage with it on a deeper level,
Okay.
Understanding the historical,
That's right.
cultural, and even economic forces that shaped its creation. It enhances our appreciation.
So it's about asking questions,
Right.
thinking critically, delving into the backstory of the artwork, who commissioned it, what was their motivation, what message were they hoping to convey?
Exactly. And sometimes those questions lead you down fascinating paths, uncovering these surprising connections between art, power, and even commerce, just like our deep dive into Leonardo and the Medici today.
It's amazing how our exploration of Renaissance art has unveiled these intricate layers of marketing and influence. It's like peeling back the layers of history to reveal the motivations and strategies at play.
Absolutely. And it highlights the fact that art history is so much more than just dates and names. It's about understanding the human stories, the power struggles, and the creative innovations that shape the art we admire today.
Well, this deep dive has been an incredible journey. So big thanks to our listener for suggesting such a thought-provoking topic. It's truly changed my perspective on Renaissance art and the enduring legacy of the Medici family.
Yeah, and thank you to our listeners for joining us on this exploration. We encourage you to continue exploring art with this newfound awareness ask questions, challenge assumptions, and uncover the hidden stories that lie beneath the surface.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep discovering the fascinating interplay between art history and the human experience.